Okay, I'm going to do a quick review of this chapter, just some things to remember. So some of the things we covered adding fractions and subtracting fractions. Now, the main part of fractions that we need to remember is that when the numerator or the denominators are the same, then we can add or subtract. If the denominators are not the same, that's these bottom numbers. Denominators, I think denominators are down, so that's how I remember where the denominators go. Denominators have to be the same. If they are not the same, we can't add unless we change them somehow. So we can add 5/9 plus 1/9, no problem. We just put the same denominator. These will always be the same. And then we add the top numbers. So 5 plus 1, that equals 6. Last, we always check to see if I can simplify. So 6/9 can be simplified because I know that both 6 and 9 can be divided by 3. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So my final answer for 5/9 plus 1/9 is 2/3. Similar is if I subtract. If I take that same number and I subtract 5/9 minus 1/9, I would then still do the same thing. As long as these two denominators are the same, I can subtract. So I put the 9 there. 5 minus 1 is 4. 4/9. I had checked now for simplification. Can I simplify? I can only divide 4 by 1, 2, or 4. 9 can only be divided by 1, 3, or 9. Since they are not, the only number they have in common would be 1, I am done. I do not need to simplify. It is already simplified. Now, we do have a little bit of a change when we have something like this. 3/5 plus 1/10. This is a situation where we don't have the same denominator. So in this situation, we just have to find an equivalent fraction to one of these so that I can make sure they both have the same numbers or same denominators. So I know that 5 or 10 is a multiple of 5, so 5 can easily become 10 if by multiplying. So what I would do is I can change these fractions to anything I want as long as I divide or multiply both the numerator and denominator by the same. It will still be the same thing. It just means I'm dividing it into smaller parts, but I have the same number in all. So I go times 2 times 2. And this is going to change this. I'll write it down below. 2 times 3, that's 6, over 2 times 5, which is 10. And now if I bring this down, 6/10 plus 1/10, these are pretty much writing the same thing. 3/5 and 6/10 are the same thing. If I were to draw a picture, you'd be able to see it. In fact, I could show you right here. I've got 3/5 and I've got 6/10, and if I stick them next to each other, they are the same thing. In fact, there's 2/10 for every 1/5, which is why I multiplied times 10. So I multiply my fifths times 2. Every fifth becomes 2/10, and if I have 3/5, 3 times 2, that's 6. That's why that works. So 6/10 plus 1/10 is 7/10. And I check for simplification. 7 is prime, so I can't divide it by anything besides 7 or 1. And 10 can't be divided by 7. It can only be divided by 1, so I am simplified. We can do the same thing with subtraction. If this was a subtraction problem, well, let's take another situation. We'll take 8/9 and we'll subtract from that 5/6. Now I can't just make 6 into 9 or 9 into 6, but I can find a number that both can become. I know 9 can become 18. Could 6 become 18? Well, yes, it can actually. If I know if I times 9 times 2, that becomes 18, and if I times 6 times 3, that becomes 18. So I know if I write it down below, both of these are going to be 18. 2 times 9 is 18, 6 times 3 is 18, and then I'm going to go 8 times 2, that's 16, 5 times 3, that's 15, and I'm going to subtract. And this makes this pretty easy. 16 eighteenths minus 15 eighteenths. We can bring the 18 across, but we go 16 minus 15, that's 1 18th. And I check for simplification, but if one of these numbers is a 1, I'm pretty sure I can know that I've simplified. All right, we've covered those, but I do want to cover another area. That's mixed numbers. So when I do mixed numbers, I usually, instead of writing them horizontally, I like to write them vertically, up and down. So we're going to start with a number like 6 3/4. We're going to add to that 2 2/4. And we just now add these. 3/4 plus 2/4 becomes 5/4. Now we really don't want to put more than 4/4 in this column. But I'll go ahead and add these whole numbers. That's usually how I like to do it. 6 plus 2, that's 8. Now I know that I don't like this. It's called an improper fraction. This can be rewritten as 8 plus, and then I can pull out 4/4 plus 1/4. I just do this mostly so you can see what I'm doing, because I know 4/4 plus 1/4 is the same as 5/4. But I also know that 4/4 is the same as writing 1 whole. So I can actually really just erase that and put a 1 there. Now I got 8 plus 1 plus 1/4. That makes this a lot easier to think through. So now I go 8 plus 1, that's 9, and all I have left is my 1/4. Now, we're going to do the same thing only we're going to do it with subtraction. We're going to take 12, can you see that? 12 and 1/4, and we're going to subtract from that 2 3/4. So we try to subtract 1/4 minus 3/4. That's not going to work very well, so I must borrow. This becomes 11 because I borrowed a whole number, and I'm going to put over here, I'm going to take out that fraction and replace the 1/4 with 1 plus 4, because I'm just going to take this denominator and I'm going to put that same amount up there, because that's equal to 1 whole. Or you could, off to the side, write it like this: 4/4 plus the 1/4, and then add that, equals 5/4. In this case, that 1/4, 1 plus 4 becomes 5. So now I can go 5/4, I can subtract 3/4, that means 2/4. Now I subtract my whole numbers. 11 minus 2, that's 9 2/4. 9 2/4, I check for simplification. 2/4 I know from experience is 1/2, but even if you forget, I can remember I can divide 2 and 4 by 2. So that would be 9, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So 9 1/2. Hopefully this helps you as you review through and get ready for the test, practicing how to do all of the math we've learned in this chapter. If you have further questions, feel free to watch this or any of the previous videos from this chapter, as well as talk to your teacher or ask help from another student.